And we're live. I think we need to like do a slower fade out of that music,
Hmm.
but we are live at least, and so that's a big plus.
We are live.
All right, everybody. Well, as you know, I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery. We have Justin Armenta from J Digitizing Studios, and we are both here with the Embroidery Nerd. And today we will be digitizing live because we totally had this planned at least more than 30 minutes ago.
If those that didn't know, Jeff and I were away and visiting the impression show last week. So we're just kind of getting back into the groove of things, uh, back to normal life after the show. We had a great show. I think we're going to maybe have a special show next week and kind of
Two
share what,
weeks,
or 2 weeks and
right? Bi-weekly. Yep.
yeah, and talk about the show and the different things that we saw there and whatnot. So we'll get into some digitizing today.
Yep. So this is the logo that was submitted to us, and we got super specific size and garment information. So we'll actually end up be doing this for a. We're gonna roll with it for a left chest, right, Justin? We'll go with the left chest size here. I'll hit this button here, and we'll go like that. Well, that one.
There we go.
I mean, good enough. You don't need to see me because I'm not all that pretty. But this is the logo that we got submitted. We're not 100% sure on the size, so I just said let's roll with like a left chest. We'll pick kind of the best size, and we'll go with that. And if we need to make adjustments later, we need to make adjustments later. But let
All
me give
right.
you guys a key thing here. When you submit artwork to a digitizer, size and location, well, those are almost mandatory. Um, because we got to know what size to do it, right? We can't digitize it 10 inches and let you scale it down to 2.
Exactly. Exactly. I would digitize this something completely differently if it was 2.25 inch tall for a hat next to a jacket back. So uh,
Yeah, but splitting the difference, we're going to go with a left chest logo, which gives us a little bit more height, and it's not a jacket back.
exactly. So I am going to be using the new Embroidery Studio 2025 coming from Wilcom, and I have the artwork here. Let's see. We can
Yep, they just released that 2 weeks ago,
2 weeks ago. Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
right before the show.
Yeah,
So there is a their icon that dims the graphics since this is a little bit darker of an image. I'm gonna go ahead and dim that. Looks like we got some contrast so I can kind of see the details. Let's go with 3.5 inches tall. That sounds good. So I'm gonna actually use the tool where I can scale, pick 2 points in the artwork, and actually set a scale to it. And there we go.
scale by reference line or something like that.
Scale by reference line, I believe it's called. Yeah, let me
All
see.
right, so you said we're going what 3.5 is what I think what you said. So
Yeah,
that put us wide.
3.5 goes with about 90 millimeters, which is just about 3.5 wide as well.
Yeah, 4 inches is what 100 millimeters, right?
Right. 101.6. I don't know why always remember that.
Point. Well, you will always remember that because if you remember it now, there you go.
All right. So I always kind of take a look at my designs and kind of analyze them as far as their approach of pathing, just to kind of get a general idea. Anytime that there's depths where there's elements of things behind one another, I start from the back forward. So we have this kind of shield image in the back here. That's going to be the background. Come forward a step, you're going to have the Wookiee himself, and then in front of that we have this kind of this banner with this text. So that's the way I'm going to work backwards to forward there in order to make sure that I have my overlapping correctly, so we don't have any gappage between the elements and whatnot. So
So
typically,
usually by now, I'd be measuring that bottom text.
yeah, that's the one concern I have right here. Bottom text is, let me go back to millimeters. Bottom text is under 5 millimeters. Width of those text, of those letters, just under a millimeter. I think there is some room in this yellow to scale up the text a bit, so I think we're going to be good.
You could definitely bump it out and current a little more.
Exactly. So I think we'll be okay with the text.
All
Uh,
right.
we could always adjust kind of the shape of this and make this yellow section a little bit bigger to make room for that text. So so typically, when I have a shape that's going to be a filled in shape and have borders on it, I like to do the borders first. That just kind of gives me a guideline of wherever I set up these borders and how thick I need to make them will kind of give me the guideline of how far I need to bring that fill underneath there. Uh,
Okay.
so I'm going to be using the Satin C or Column C, I'm sorry, tool. And that's where you just plot just a single line on your shape. And when I have a double outline like this, I like using the point where it's between the two, and that way I can kind of
And then
set
kind of do an offset on each side of it.
exactly. We can offset on one and an offset on the other, and that way they're going to be you're basically going to be duplicating and using the same plotted point for both, and that way you're not going to have any question if they're going to line up or not. And I hit something weird there.
You know, I just realized I didn't have the chat up. And so we have comments.
Oh,
I was like, wait a minute. So we have, I'll go through those while you're plotting around there. We have Barb joining us from northern central Minnesota, where it's mildly cold. We have Identity Threads joining us from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Doug joining us. Great classes at Impressions. Doug was in, I think he was in both your classes, right?
yeah, he was in 2 out of the 3 classes.
Two
Yeah.
out of the three classes. Good to see you, Doug. And then everybody's saying hi to each other in the comments. So we'll just let them chat it up. If you guys do have questions or you do have comments, make sure you drop them in there so that we can address them. And as always, while I'm still interrupting because Justin's ready to say something, but I'm not going to let him yet.
No.
As always, make sure that you like and subscribe so you get notifications when we do go live or we post a video. Okay, Justin, your turn.
All right. So I went ahead and plotted the first point, and I copied uh, this border here, and using the offset, using the column C, I can tell it to go in 75%. So it's going to actually go inside that line that I plotted. I don't think it needs to be that wide. So let's change the good thing about the column C tool, you can actually just change the width of the actual line weight with just a value here. And when I have a double outline, I always tend to do the bottom or the outer outline first and then come back and work my way inside for the secondary outlines. It just, when throwing down the fill and throwing down the outline, again, building that foundation, making sure that there's no movement in that material working your way outward. So you're just building that foundation and working your way up. And I always digitize using really high contrasting colors just to make sure I can see without the artwork distracting me. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the majority of the machines, I'm not aware of many of them that you can just straight dump from your file to a color. And I rarely ever digitize in the colors. It's actually the art. I digitize whatever I want, and then export the PDF that gives the sequence.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So since I'm doing this background area first, we do have that outer border. I'm going to go ahead and walk over to this inner border here, still using my column C tool. And again, I'm just doing the parts that I know that are borders here. Change the stitch length on that travel stitch. Oop, that's too long.
All right. And Doug says, I would love a session going through all the different column tools in Embroidery Studio, which is actually something that Justin's going to be throwing together. Probably will be in shorts.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you can plan on seeing those. Believe it or not, we schedule out our shorts ahead of time in advance. So it should be within the next, either next week or the next couple of weeks. I would think we'd have that going out.
Yeah. So since there's symmetrical shapes involved here, I will digitize like one side of things and just copy and paste and mirror over. So to just to save some time. So I like to go ahead and get all my settings down on those shapes since I'm going to be um, copy and pasting them. If I do it ahead of time, then just to make sure that it's all said and done and I don't have to individually change any of that. So all that looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and do this little star shape over here. And that way I can copy everything that's on this side over to this side. So I'm only digitizing it once. So another column tool, you can go with a column A or column B. I'm going to go with a column A, which is the standard point counterpoint. And when going through pieces like this, I'm not too worried about start and end points right now because I can go back and adjust those later. Or there is a setting on Willcom 2025 that actually has closest join as an automatic setting that you can set on these objects. Let's see, this part is 7 millimeters wide, so that's a little wide. Go ahead and digitize that. So a quick way of, if you select that whole thing and you hit J, that actually will do closest join. So if you can see that the start and stops here,
And you said that was J or Shift J?
that is J.
Ah.
And one thing, when you do use an automatic tool like something like J, as you can see, it did have the stop point out there because I did end that element at this point. I don't like having my lock stitches at really small stitches. So I always usually try to bring them into the wider part of that element if we're going to have a lock there. So that's going to be white. Okay, so now I have this section here that I know is the same on this side. So if I select it all, and if I right click on it and hold, I can move that section. And I'm going to use, I don't remember if it's shift or control to
Either control and or shift.
yeah, either control and or shift will constrain keeping it in the same line.
See, and you do this completely different than how I would do it.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I just selected it, right click and hold. I'm holding shift and control. And as soon as I let go of that, I know it's directly copied and even with this one. And then there's a handy dandy tool that's just a mirror. And then I can move those into place.
Yeah, I would have used because there's one where you can make it mirror off a line that you draw,
Right. So
or you can copy and paste it and put it there, and then flip it, and then change the positive value to a negative value and throw it across.
yeah, there's a lot of shorthand and tricks.
Let's put the 8 way. Oh no, I don't think I can say that saying. 8 ways to butter a bread. I'm going to
Yeah,
use that one instead of the skin of something else.
exactly.
Um,
So just resequencing here. I usually, as I work, I know a lot of people will just kind of digitize everything and go back and resequence. I try to, every time I do a major change, I try to resequence it just so it's a little less jumbled here in my object list at the very end.
it's
So,
easier to keep it straight. If you do it as you go along, it's a lot easier to keep it straight than trying going, oh, I have to put a pathing stitch here. What
exactly,
number in the 480 objects do I have? Do I have to stick this in front of?
exactly. So again, another way of sequencing, you can select and hold down Control, and that will select multiple objects. And as you select, you can use this tool here in the resequence tool. And if you do by sequence by selects, it's actually going to put it in the order of those objects that you select. So I selected this side, this travel stitch, and then this side. And as you can see, it put those in order.
Yeah. And the majority of softwares have all of these tools to
Correct.
some varying degrees. So if you see something that we do here, I mean, honestly, the scale by reference line, I saw a video that DJ did, and he referenced how to do that. And he goes, any software that every software has this type of tool somewhere. And then I went and looked, and I went, son of a gun, there it is. Because before I was doing it the hard way.
So just to add some texture and some dimension, there is this green background that does extend out, but there does kind of look like there is a kind of a center circle behind the Wookiee and then this outer part. So I'm going to actually break that up into 3 fills, just to get a little bit of difference of light sheen to them. Kind of gives it a little bit of dimension of a badge or a shield or something like
Well, and
that.
you're layering, right? You're working from the back to the front.
Exactly. So that's this part of the green. Actually could have done. I could have done part of my copying and pasting, but I didn't realize I didn't do that. So let's see.
Fired.
Fired. So
And
let's.
I think that this is a really good element that while Justin's doing this is something that could be very debatable because as you can see, Justin put the green on top of the red, and I would have done it the other way.
Oh, I'm dropping it behind it. I was
Oh,
just digitizing on top.
never mind. Justin's doing it the way that I would do it, and it's the right way.
There you go. So again, just kind of moving my start and stop points here. I'm gonna
But this is a good example of when you're digitizing something, you wanted the fewest amount of color changes, but sometimes you have to add a color change in order to maintain the visual integrity of the design.
right. Exactly. So now I'm going to do the background here. And again, you can see some overlapping just to make sure that when those fill stitches are pulling away from the other elements, that you won't have any gappage in there.
And so far, again, this is going on a left chest. I don't think I told you what fabric to use, so we're just kind of going with like middle of the road right now, aren't we?
Right. Yeah. Once we get that information for the person who we're doing it for, we could always make those slight adjustments last. So 20 degrees, that's a good angle to use on that. So
So if you know, I'm going to throw popcorn during the whole time, Justin, because why not? If you notice where Justin has the two fills that are overlapping, the red one and the green one, that there are
mhm,
two different stitch angles, and he does that so that the one that's supposed to be in the front actually sits on top. If you put them in the same stitch angle, they're going to blend in together, and it'll kind of give you, we'll get like a zipper kind of look. It'll blend in more in some places, and you won't have a nice crisp line where you want it.
exactly. And what I usually do at the end of my fills, just to combat any push, again, not knowing exactly what kind of fabric, this angle here, this is the angle line of the fill right here. So anywhere that the fill is going to be pushing out at that angle, I like to stop short, just so it doesn't push out. So the fact that it has a double outline shouldn't be a factor of registration, but I always just by habit kind of do that to make sure that that fill's not pushing out past those outlines.
I mean, it's good to plan for the distortion because not all the time will it come back and say, "Hey, I need to edit because I was sewing this on denim and now I'm going to sew it on a sheer fabric."
Exactly.
So digitizing for the compensation that it'll be covered by both is always a good plan because you don't always get the information that you need when you get the design, like what size is it or what fabric is it going on.
Exactly.
I'm totally not giving the guy that gave us this design a hard time while I wait for him to text us back.
So we have the background done. So the outer shield, we have the sequence there.
All right, Justin, I'm going to grab you right now just for a question that we had pop in that
Yeah.
you can show here. Barb asks, oh, I'll put it on screen too. That's even better. Barb asks, is there a shortcut key for the run stitch?
I believe it's F1.
There, so I'll answer because there is a shortcut key for sure. Because there is for every input type. But let's say you're digitizing a fill. If you hit the space bar, it'll go to a run. And then if you hit the space bar again, it'll go back to a fill.
Yes.
So there is a shortcut key to select it, but also if you're digitizing an element and you want to jump to do a run stitch to run between the elements, you can hit the space bar and it'll do that as well.
That's correct. Yes. Is it F8 or F1 is the hotkey for?
It doesn't tell you if you hover over it.
No, it does not. Not on the running stitch. It's weird.
Well, if anybody's watching this video that may or may not have a way to change that.
Yeah. It's weird because I'm actually digitizing on a Mac right now using Parallel, so the F keys don't work the same, but I do have it programmed on my mouse at home, and I did discover it was either F1 or F8 on a Windows keyboard. So try one of those two as far as the hotkey. But like Jeff was saying, if I'm digitizing in a fill, as soon as I close that fill out and I hit the space bar, you hit the space bar and toggle back and forth between a running stitch and whatever tool that you were using previously.
I think if you hit spacebar, it'll close out your
It'll close out
your object and toggle at the same time.
Correct. You might have to hit it twice. It closes out once and then
does it.
Yeah.
I know that's one of those speed optimization things that they put in that a lot of people use. Well, I use it a lot.
Yeah. So if I was on a fill, spacebar closes it, spacebar finishes it, and then
now you're on a run.
Now I'm on run. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, I always hit enter and then hit space. Old habits die hard.
Right. All right. So the full background's done. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And that way I can just see the edges of my Wookiee here. Again, working forward to back. His shoulders are going to be behind his kind of beard looking thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and do those sections first.
Oh, and we need this in puff, and it's got to be like eight layers, Justin.
Uh-huh.
2 inches tall on a hat, upside down.
I'm going to go ahead and use the satin B tool. I use that a lot when I guess having the satin settings on is probably a good idea. I use the satin B tool a lot when there's different shapes, as far as it's not just a random or a uniform shape that I'm digitizing. If I'm going to have kind of areas that are maybe wider or thinner in areas, I think you can control it a little bit better when you do one side at a time.
I mean, honestly, I think that the biggest advantage of it is, while you still have to digitize with roughly the same amount of nodes, the number of stitch angles that it puts in is significantly less.
Correct.
So there's less calculation going on. That's actually, so Justin, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to try this. So finish up your object here. Because I believe this is Mr. Frank Dunn says spacebar also toggles. Oh, it toggles nodes in reshape.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Yep. If you're in node editing.
I read that when I saw it on there. I thought it said it also toggles tools, and I was like, wait, hold on.
No. So if you have a curved node and you hit spacebar, it'll change it to a straight node, and vice versa. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So this shoulder part here.
And I do like watching Justin digitize because he does it differently than I would.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely would have done this completely different than he has. So I'd have done it with a fill and then thrown the shading on the top of it. But also, I'm also known as Flat Jeff.
So I'm just going through and I'm adding some angle lines here on the different satins.
Fun fact, to add an angle line to an object, it's Control H.
Control H. Let me see. Oh.
So if you select an item, hit Control H, and now you can do your angle line.
That's pretty cool. I did not know that one, as I'm throwing angle lines out here where they don't belong.
So that's one thing that the column, I'm going to call it the column B tool, does. That it's either A, I don't know that it exists, or B, I don't think that it does it. Is it would be when you finish digitizing an object, it just fills it with stitches and it doesn't necessarily ask you to throw in the stitch angle. So you have to go back over at the end and put them in because it puts one at the at the extreme ends
Gotcha.
of each side. So it could just be a lack of knowledge thing, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't just ask you to start throwing in stitch angles, although I think it would be a very good addition.
So let's, I'm going to do a different brown here since we do have a tan already. Oh, we do have, let's see if I remember. That's a bit dark.
If only there was a really, really cool tool on the internet that you could upload a piece of artwork and find the color that matches it close. But
Yes.
oh wait, there is. It's called embroiderynerd.io, and you can utilize the thread converter. I really love it when Justin digitizes and I get it. We call it throwing popcorn from the stands. I know Justin loves it when he gets to throw popcorn at me too. So
Exactly. It's all love. So again, two sides symmetrical. I've got the shape. So being that this is a Wookiee and kind of hairy, I like using the randomization on the fill here. If you give it kind of a percentage of, if you kind of see here.
I have a question, Justin. What's the advantage of using randomization over using the hand stitch effect?
So the hand stitch effect is pretty randomized, where there might be some gappage in there. It is harder to control when you're not needing full coverage on a fill. The hand stitch tool is definitely a really cool tool to use. It gives you a quite a bit more randomization, a real rough look. So doing real fur textures and trying to use lighter densities and shading and whatnot, the hand stitch tool is definitely a cool tool to use.
So basically, what the way that my takeaway from that is that if you need the coverage, then randomization is better to use.
Exactly.
All right. As long as I'm understanding science.
So again, kind of resequencing here. Traveling over to this fill. And just resequencing between my, selecting them all and hitting J, it'll do the closest join.
So this is something that when you digitize first and resequence second, you have to do a lot of times when you're going, when you're actually digitizing in order, like he did the first set of objects, he doesn't have to go back and do as many changes. But when the resequencing starting,
Right.
a lot of this reshuffling and movement of start and stop points has to happen.
And another thing too, to travel through the elements, if you want to kind of go through and make sure that the sequence of your elements are correct. I know sometimes seeing these little icons through here is a little hard, but if you select one and you hit tab, as you can see, the highlight of the element that you're on, it kind of runs through them, and you can kind of see that you're going in the correct direction.
And if you hit one, you're like, wait, hold up, I need to go back. If you hold Shift Tab, it'll go through them in reverse.
Correct. So Shift Tab and Tab.
And that also, just so you guys know, it works when you're in the Node Edit tool too. So if you're Node Edit, and you start tabbing because you're moving start and stop points, you can sequence down through without having to select each object.
Correct. Just like that there. You can kind of go through them, move your stop starts.
Adjust stitch angles, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So Barb says the Wookiee would make a good Sasquatch, and sometimes I sit here and wonder if that's not where it came from. Right? It's from a book, but books don't have pictures, so you think they just went like, we're going to make it look like Bigfoot.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of going through, making sure that because as you can see here, these sections aren't quite symmetrical on either side. So I just kind of want to make sure that if I'm going to use that copy and paste and mirror tool, that sometimes these are hand drawn or drawn in a way that they aren't perfectly symmetrical. But going through here, looking at his cheeks, looking at the size of his mouth, his nose, his head up here, it does look symmetrical throughout, except for these two little points.
All right, Justin. As the popcorn stands here, Barb says, "What about the trims?"
The trim. So I have settings on that. Let's unhide everything here. Oops, unhide all. Why aren't my... I think I have something turned off here.
Usually it's either like the T key or the S key. Unless if it's passed perfectly, and then
Yeah, maybe so.
Justin did it perfect, so there aren't. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of times when I do a design like this and Justin does it, he's resequencing it as he goes along, and he's setting the start points and stop points of each object.
Right.
So it should automatically join it. Usually, when I'm done with a design, the replay, slow redraw, whatever we're going to call it, you can actually tell that you want it to stop on trims. So when I'm doing something like this, I would put that to stop on trim, and I put it at an insanely high speed, so
And
that
that,
really it's just stopping at each element that has a trim, and I can see it. And there you can see all the trims that Justin has.
yeah. So one of the new features in 2025 is they actually showed in the wireframe the trim's going to be represented by the red triangles, and the tie-ins are going to be at the red circles. So,
And I believe if you have a design digitized by 2025 and you take it into an older version of software, the trims will also be red.
oh, okay.
I may or may not have discovered that. Fun fact.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I know my settings are set that they're not going to trim unless they're at least 2 millimeters distance from each other. And yes, because I am pathing everything and making sure that the start and stops lining up, I'm not going to have any unnecessary trims throughout the design. So I'm going to hide the rest of this stuff so I can go back to... And what I like to do as well, especially if I know that I'm going to be using this setting of this tool with all the upcoming elements, I go ahead and set the settings that I want as far as pull compensation, density, everything I want in that first one. And then there's a tool that says copy. I don't know why it's not showing over it, but it's basically copy properties of the selected tool that you have on.
I believe it says make properties current and then apply current properties. So it makes the properties of that object the properties of that's the current default properties. And then when you can apply it to old objects or anything you digitize moving forward.
Right.
Will be that.
So once I copy or make the properties current, I know that everything that I'm going to be digitizing using the same tool is going to be using that same property. So again, just making sure that I'm not going to have to do too much changing of
properties, underlays, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
It's not a fun thing to go in after the fact and try and select everything you need to change the properties in one shot.
Exactly. So I'm just going to go through here, do parts of his beard. And I know this section down here with the shoulders already done, so I'm not worried about that. And one thing I can show here, this is in Wilcom 2025 as well as, I didn't lock my artwork down, as well as older versions of Wilcom. But they have a branching tool that is pretty handy, that instead of trying to path all this myself and do travel stitches and whatnot, I can go through here, select this whole beard area, and there is a branching tool. And what you do is you select that and you select where you want it to start. So if I wanted to start on this satin here and I wanted to end at this satin, as you can see, all those trims went away. And what that did was slow that down a bit.
Throw it in True View too, so You can see it a little better
Yeah. So it'll
because you're in wireframe.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Now play it through.
So it'll choose the pathing and the underlay that's needed using the underlay settings to get from my starting point to the end point in the best possible way. But the branching tool is definitely a cool tool to use. So I'm going to come in here and measure. My mouse is being kind of weird right now. So those pieces are more than a millimeter wide. So I think we'll be safe to kind of do some satins with those.
Well, and if you're going to throw the other brown on top of it, then you can definitely throw them a little bit wider.
I was gonna throw the fill underneath. I always
Oh,
do
okay.
like I always do the outlines first just to kind of frame my area. So when I'm doing the fills underneath, I know,
You, okay.
yeah, I know where it can fall under. So if I'm looking at this part of the face is kind of going to be forward more than the back. So I'm going to go continue and just go around his head for the outside fur areas. Yeah, my mouse is being weirdly responsive today.
Dang it, it's working too well. We need to break it.
So just coming through, using satins for kind of that texture of the hair. I think I'm going to use these kind of big eyebrowny things to kind of bring my pathing to the center of the face. So I'll go ahead and kind of jump up to this part.
So I'm gonna pull up a. We have a comment here, and I'm gonna pull it up, and I'm gonna say that my answer is based off of theory and personal experience. I don't know exactly how it fully does work, but Doug asks, when you do a print, does it count a trim that is less than 2 millimeters that in reality won't trim? And I hope that makes sense. So from what I have noticed in the Wilcom platform is that if it shows a trim on the screen, it's going to trim and it will count it. If it doesn't show a trim on the screen, then it won't trim. I've never had it. Well, let me throw an exception in that. I've never had it count a trim that doesn't actually trim. I've had it not count a trim, particularly when I'm using text and it does lowercase I, because it'll, like closest join, it'll go into the middle of the eye, it'll travel up, it'll trim, it'll do the dot of the eye, it'll trim again, and then come back down and do the rest of the eye. Is the only time I've ever seen it not really count a trim. But other than that, every time I've digitized and there's been a trim showing on the screen, it's happened. Uh, yeah, so I think I answered that question. I hope I answered that question. If not, let us know. But I don't know. What's your experience been, Justin?
Yeah, from the way you described it is kind of where I'm at. There's been, and I don't know if this is a compatibility thing, but there's been a few times where I know I'm opening an older file or something that may be created in Hatch that I'm opening in Wilcom, and it'll register no matter what setting that I like. If I select this and I select no, trim off
Oh,
completely,
hmm.
it will still read that there's a trim there, and it doesn't matter what setting I do here. So I have to go into actually stitch mode and go and find that trim code and remove it manually. But that's again, that's kind of a weird uh,
So I
anomaly.
do know that if you insert a stitch command in the stitch menu, so if you manually insert a stitch command, then it doesn't matter what setting you do, it won't take it out. You have to go in and pull it. If you manually,
Then, so maybe they're the file that I'm using. Um,
it was manually put in.
it was manually put in, right?
Yeah. So it looks like we had Scott from Sunrise Tactical Gear join us. We actually got to meet him
Yes,
in Long Beach, and he gave us a patch to put on our hats because he makes patches.
that is correct. It's nice to meet you.
And there was a really cool. Did you do the vending machine, Justin?
The FlexFit vending machine. Yes.
So they had the FlexFit had a vending machine at the store that would vend out a hat, and the hats had the loop side of Velcro on the front two panels, and they were giving away Velcro patches that you could stick to the front two panels. Mine is currently at Justin's house, but it will be coming to me because he had more room than I did. But that was a really cool thing that FlexFit did. I thought it was very unique to do at the show, especially with the vending machine. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Oops. So just kind of working my way through the forehead here.
And we have Arnaldo joining us. So hello, Arnaldo. Oh, and Scott says that he missed the vending machines. It was really cool. They had a really big line at it most of the time, and they ran out of hats on the last day because I did try to go back and get one for Britta over at ZSK, but the vending machine was empty.
Oh, did they end up finally running out?
Oh, they definitely ran out. So we have DJ Kev joining us. Says I use different digitizing software, but I like to watch the digitizing on other software. A lot of times, the digitizing theory is the same. You have your run stitch, you have a fill stitch, you have a satin stitch. It's usually just the settings or the tools that change how it runs in that software. But you can always learn how to do something in your software from watching somebody else do something in theirs.
Correct. Let's see. I'm just kind of resequencing things and
Yeah. And Doug says he didn't have time to wait in line for a hat. We got lucky and we hit it like right as the show closed, I think, on one day, and there was nobody there because they were kind of cleaning up and putting away. So we got lucky to get there when there was nobody there.
yeah, that was it was late one day and we lucked out and got a hat and got a patch that they were giving away. These small little areas in the kind of the eyebrows, they're pretty thin, so I'm just gonna go ahead and create those using running stitches because that's going to be sufficient in that kind of area there. Let's see the eye.
So now I have a question, Justin, because this is we touched on this a little bit later, but you said that you were going to put the tan fill underneath the satin.
Underneath right now I'm just digitizing the dark detail, so I will be filling the background with the lighter brown.
So my question comes in with the pathing stitches that you're putting there that are ultimately going to be visible, correct?
These here will be visible. These are just the small little eyebrow hairs, but these travel will be covered by this darker area around the eyes.
All right, I'm just gonna have to wait and see how Justin does it because he's doing it different than I would do it. So we'll see what magic he pulls out.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and travel through here, the eyeball. I'm gonna come back down here. We can do some satin stitches here. That's kind of a weird shape. Sometimes your fingers go a little bit faster than your brain. You start,
or the computer lags and doesn't catch up quite fast enough.
Exactly. You think you're plotting one point, but you're not quite there. I could say that I'm a lot more efficient on my computer at home just because of my program keys on my mouse and just kind of the more comfortable with that computer. I'm a lot faster. So let's see. We're gonna come back and
it's not a Mac.
And it's not a Mac. Exactly. So come through here.
All right. So we have a question here from Barb. She says, "Can you change a section of a running stitch to a satin and then back to a running?"
Running won't turn to a satin, but you can turn it to the column C. You can convert it since a satin is column A or B is made up with two sides of plotted points, the side counter side. So it's not going to convert necessarily directly over from a running stitch, but because the column C is created by just a single row of nodes, then it can be converted over.
And then Gina says, "Are you using a hotkey to go from straight to satin stitch?" And we hit on that a little bit earlier, but we talked about it again. So if you're on a satin stitch tool or a fill stitch tool or anything but a running stitch tool, and you hit the space bar, it'll go to running stitch. And then if you hit space bar again, it'll go back to your last tool that you used essentially.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
So that's how he's flipping kind of between a satin tool and a run tool so quickly.
That is correct. So now I'm going to come down and
we are about 50 minutes in, so you'll get to hear a word from our sponsor. Today's live is sponsored by Embroidery Nerd. No, I'm just kidding.
so yeah, what I could probably do is, since I'm so deep into this design as it is, for this person, I can go ahead and I'll record the rest of my digitizing on this and maybe break it up into a couple of shorts or maybe a long form video. And that way you can kind of just see the finished part of where I go with it. And
So DJ Kev asks, is there underlay being used in the satin fur?
there is. This particular design isn't going for kind of that loose look. I could give it some more texture. I mean, this is kind of a cartoonish version of a character, so um, they are kind of solid lines as far as the detail and whatnot. So I am giving it underlay and looking for more of that solid satin look.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, it looks like you're a center run underlay right now on these
Yeah,
elements.
yeah. So there is underlay, and I am going for kind of that satin or that solid look to it. So if I was something a little bit more realistic or just trying to add a little bit more artistic flair to it, um, I may use kind of lighter densities on some satins to kind of get some show through on that to kind of get more of a shading look instead of that solid look.
Well, Justin, I just found out it's going on a hat.
Is it really?
Yeah,
uh,
that's okay. We'll just cut the top of the hat off so we can sew 3.5 inches.
so okay, so
It changes some things.
it does change some things, and I can show maybe where I would pivot. Um, let's jump off of here. So maybe where I would pivot and change it to a hat, but there is the concern about the word Iowa down at the bottom because at 3.5 inches tall, it was barely big enough to finagle in there. So that might be
Yep.
that might be discussion with the end customer to see how important that is. Maybe you could throw Iowa on the back or the side of the hat, something like that.
So right, but like with this, the original thing is maybe we drop that down a little bit bigger to make that element larger, and now that with that option is basically removed. So the other option would be actually to move Wookiees up to cover a little bit more of the facial feature and try and make Iowa bigger to the point that you can sew it, or like you're saying, pull it and put it somewhere else. It'd just be
Right.
easier.
Yeah. So yeah, that's again information from the get go would definitely be helpful for the end customer to let me know that. So I would address these concerns beforehand. You know,
It changes the stitch types that you'd use all over the face because they were all very narrow satins.
right. So yeah, I'll probably have to go back and kind of rework his face now that this is going to be a good at least an inch smaller, if not an inch and a quarter more smaller. So I'll probably come back and do a lot of that detail in his face and running stitches now because those satins were barely at a millimeter wide. Um,
Your stars are probably going to get
yeah,
sized up a little bit and your inner outlines. So this is a prime example of, um, when people ask you, can I take a left chest and can I put it on a hat? Or can I take a hat and can I put it on a left chest? This is a prime example of, why this information is good to give to your digitizer ahead of time. But not only that, you could probably take a hat logo of this and put it on a shirt, but going the other direction because of the size of the satins in the face, it's just not possible.
right,
So it has to be reworked. And this is why sometimes when you send in and you go to a digitizer and say, hey, I want it smaller, you're going to get charged for a new logo because it is a significant rework. It's not just a small edit at this point.
right. Yeah, it's definitely like Jeff was saying. If I would have known from the get go, say that they were saying that this is a shirt and a hat, one way of approaching it, you know, less expensive way as far as digitizing is concerned. I would digitize it for a hat, make the necessary changes that I need to the design, and yes, you can take that because the way I'm going to digitize it for a hat would work for a shirt. If they're saying no, I want it for a hat at 2.25, the shirt's going to be 3.5 inches tall. Looking at this, saying like, yeah, I'm probably going to want to digitize it in two different ways. So it might be a design plus a revision fee, or depending on how much different I'm going to have to do, it maybe even be two completely digitized designs. So yeah, I'll rework this and kind of record it as I'm working, and that way you can kind of see what changes I made from what you saw in the live today, and how it ends up.
Yeah, because this is a good example of definitely changes. I mean, looking at some of the other changes is going to definitely change the mouth and the teeth and it might even change the sequencing of the objects, considering what's going to be sewn first, what's going to be sewn second. Um, it's definitely going to change your the way you were going to run your outlines, because one of the things I noticed Justin didn't do that he typically always teaches and preaches is he didn't do a global underlay under the whole thing,
Right.
which he will definitely do. I can tell you for a fact he will do that if it's going on a hat
On a hat.
versus if it's
Right.
going on a shirt. It's not necessarily completely needed.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, different approach. Looking at some questions here on the side.
Yeah, make sure you catch. I think I caught all of the questions, but just scan through there and make sure that we get all the questions. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull us both up here side by side. So I'm going to remove your screen, and I'm just going to say while he's doing that, if you guys aren't following us on social media, be sure to hit like and subscribe. You can always find us at links.embnerd.com, where you'll find a link to our Facebook group. You'll find a link to our Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel and our Discord channel, where you can come and join our conversation. So, did we catch all the questions, Justin?
Yeah, I think Barb was just talking about the trim. She was just saying that she's doing a Corvette main body, and the parts are outlined, the trims are crazy in the outline, so I've been resequencing. Yeah, so check your resequencing, making sure that, if you're traveling from one point to another, that your travel stitches are ending where the for the next satin stitch, say, is beginning. So the start and end points are definitely a big thing to look at. If you are working in Wilcom, you can select everything and hit J, and it'll do the closest join. Uh, if you do have
But
to,
only if they're sequenced properly.
correct. You have to have them sequenced properly for them to be closest join. If you were to grab, four elements in the sequence, and then the fifth element's like 7 elements away in your sequence window, it's not going to do closest join because they're not in sequential order. So do that. Hit J, do your run through, and like Jeff was saying, you can set it to stop at trims, and that way it really identifies if your quick redraw stops, it's stopping on a trim. You can identify, there's a trim there. If you are running 2025, you do have those red triangles to kind of show you where those trims are. So that'll kind of help you identify.
And if you're not running 2025 in an older version, they're like a dark gray or a dark black. They just made them more visible by putting them
Right.
in a red color in 2025. That was one of the things that they did change. So, but yeah, if you guys want to join our conversation, if you want to follow us, like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, we're more than available. And Justin, like Justin said, he's going to do a couple of shorts and maybe a little short form video on the changes that he would make to address this to a
hat file.
It was like my mind just went completely blank there for a second, and everything stopped, and I just got completely lost. But with that, guys, it brings us. We're about 57 minutes in. It's bringing us to the end of the live, and a lot of the changes that Justin would need to make at this point will take significantly longer than the next 15 minutes at least.
Right.
So we're going to go ahead and end the live at this point. As far as announcements, I don't think that we have anything huge coming up. We did just finish the Long Beach show. I think right now we're just waiting for some other stuff, some other notifications, some other engagements to be scheduled and to pan through before we're going to have any announcements on that. But do you want to throw anything in here, Justin?
No, thanks for joining us tonight. Again, I'll follow up and post in the group and our socials the end result and the changes that I made on this design, so you can kind of follow up and see where I had to pivot here. Now that we got this late notification that it is going on hats, so we'll make that pivot and hopefully shed some light on how you can make those changes.
All right. With that, everybody, I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. We have Justin Arminja from JA Digitizing Studios. We are both here with the Embroidery Nerd. We'd like to thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.
Good night, everybody.